There are a lot of morons out there who have had takes and a lot to say about FSU's culture due to one game of this season. They wanted to talk about the opt-outs and plenty more, and I'm going to call them out pretty directly so that you guys can separate the idiots from those who understand football. Also going to show you a clip from UGA's Kirby Smart, which shocked me a little bit and most undoubtedly proves them wrong. So you've probably already seen the Kirby quote, and so I'll play that a little bit later. If not, stay tuned. We'll bring it on in just a moment. But first, I want to look at some of these complete morons who either think or are just being intellectually dishonest about how Florida State's culture is somehow an issue due to some opt-outs in just one game. Now, stick with me. There are several tweets that we're going to show you, but we'll get them queued up and get them going. Very first one up is somebody you may or may not be familiar with, but it's Mike Farrell of Mike Farrell Sports, who said, "Good on UGA. They weren't playing for anything, but cared anyhow. Culture is always important." I'll come back to that in just a moment. I don't necessarily agree that they weren't playing for anything, but that was Mike's take. Next up, Matt Jones for Kentucky Sports Radio. Last thing I want to say, apparently Florida State has 14 starters that are opted out, and Georgia, none or very few. Maybe, just maybe, that's a program culture thing. Georgia has won the last two titles. The fact that all their players wanted to play might say something about their program versus the other. Now, again, another very uninformed, unintelligent take from an SEC homer who covers Kentucky football, which hasn't been relevant in, well, you guessed it, forever. But here's his take. Next up, Josh Pate agreed with him. Josh Pate, who I know plenty of you watch his show, I think he does a really good job at times with different things, but this is the only takeaway on the day. And it's not saying Norvell has a poor culture at FSU, but it absolutely is a testament to Bama and UGA. Here's the big problem with Josh's, and we'll move on, is that you can't imply that culture matters when guys are playing and then somehow say that that doesn't reflect poorly on the other side. It's just intellectually dishonest. I saw multiple Noles 247 guys respond to this in disagreement. They work for the same company that Pate works for. Let's keep rolling. On the very next one, Mike Griffith, 32. I'll say this first. Mark Ryan, who is a UF alum, who he is quote tweeting here, is a pretty big FSU hater. Big-time Gator guy, now works covering Clemson and South Carolina. So never been a big FSU guy, but he did kind of go to bat for FSU here. The committee ripped FSU's heart out, and you want to cast judgment about their next game with half a team, get the hell out of here. Mike Griffith. Georgia was pretty disappointed too, Mark, but their players' response was to opt in and finish the season together. That's not judgment. That's just fact. Yes, Georgia was disappointed. And again, we'll talk about the difference between Georgia playing in this game and Florida State playing in this game in just a moment. But again, another SEC homer, SEC idiot, Mike Griffith, gives you his take. Colin Cowherd, who is probably the least important person when it comes to covering college football of any of the national talking heads ever, sits out in LA and pretends to have a pulse on what's going on in college football. Just a radio talking head. I get it. You know, I think my opinion's important on college football too. That's fine. Leadership comes in many forms. For instance, you don't always get your way, but you should still be an adult. Pretty solid life advice. FSU coaches and administration whined, pouted, and their players followed their lead. Many refused to play, some transferred, and this is the result. Again, just a completely ignorant, asinine statement. We'll continue to move on, but hilarious to see from Cowherd. Terrell Owens, a little bit too much CTE, probably injected for this guy. For everyone that wasn't mad but furious because FSU was left out, wasn't chosen for the playoff, this is why. Seems like the committee was right on this one. I'm just saying the SEC is just a different brand of football. No hate, no shade. Also, no brains or common sense. Again, the CTE is very dangerous and maybe something that Terrell Owens should get looked at. It's trying to compare the fact that Florida State had guys opted out and this was the way that their team played is absolutely hilarious. Peter Burns of the ESPN SEC Network. Georgia destroying FSU was a case study in culture. Again, there's a big culture problem at FSU. UGA had reason to be upset about the playoff snub. The Bulldogs locked in. The Seminoles checked out. FSU's success was because of how well they hit the transfer portal, but transfers tend to be mercenaries who value themselves over the team. This is probably the most asinine of all the takes. I'll stay on Burns for just a moment here. Saying that just because a kid transfers in, he somehow cares less about the program is incredible to me to hear. Especially when you consider that Jordan Travis watched his leg get snapped in half on senior night and then put off surgery so that he could be with his team 6.5 days later in Gainesville when they beat the Gators in the Swamp. The idea that somehow transfers do not care about the team and do not care about the program is absolutely asinine, especially when several of those transfers were multi-year players for Florida State. I don't have to go through all of them, but you know Jared Verse, you know Fabian Lovett, you know Jarian Jones, you know Trey Benson, you know Johnny Wilson, you know several of these guys. And somehow Burns says if you don't commit to somewhere out of high school, you can't love that team as much as the other guys do. Jordan Travis, a transfer, could not love the team the same way that other guys did. Absolutely asinine and disrespectful for Peter Burns. He sucks at his job, and he's just an SEC homer. He's the Danny Cannell, no disrespect, of the SEC. But do you not think that if Fox offered Peter Burns double his salary and he had a better opportunity, he wouldn't jump ship in a minute? And then could he not love that Fox job because it wasn't his first one? Peter Burns is a complete clown. And the statement at the end, transfers tend to be mercenaries who value themselves over the team. What a blanketly wrong, sweeping generalization of a statement from Peter Burns. Absolutely asinine, and I hope you guys go destroy him for that. Next up, Chris Doering, former Gator wide receiver. Now, again, very big SEC homer. Danny Cannell, I won't play the whole video, but Danny Cannell basically says that the game didn't matter. This is what happens when guys opt out. This is what happens when you get left out of the playoff, blah, 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 blah. Chris Doering, typical FSU lack of commitment. Again, a sweeping generalization from a guy who picked Florida to beat Florida State, both early in the year and then again late in the year too. So had to throw in that, as much as Cannell is a homer, the guys that work for the SEC network, Chris Doering is just as bad at it. Doering hadn't tweeted, I noticed this, for 24 days. His last tweet was on December 7th. And he came crawling out of the woodwork. Couldn't say much when Florida State beat Florida, but he came crawling out of the woodwork when his daddy, Georgia, ended up knocking off Florida State. Finally, somebody from the SEC could beat the Seminoles because it hadn't happened in 3 years. Doering finally came out of the woodwork to comment on a game like this. So, again, idiot. Next up. This might be the last one. Yeah, Tashawn Reed used to cover the Seminoles, was a beat writer here, now works nationally, and again, shows his idiocy, shows how much of a clown he is. I don't know what the comment you'd say here is, but again, using a team that opted out as justification for why they should not have made the playoff is hilarious to me. Several things going on here. One, the lack of culture. Number two, you've got idiots that say, wow, Florida State's team opted out, and so they didn't deserve to make the playoff. It's funny to me that the team was obviously not the same with Jordan Travis not there, and that's why they got left out. But then we were still holding the team that had 40 guys not there to the standards of the team that went 13-0, or I guess 11-0 with Jordan Travis. So funny? Not really to me. I think it's pretty intellectually dishonest. Here's why I think most of those guys are wrong on all of that. We talked about this in our live today, but when you look at non-portal opt-outs, I think you're looking at guys like Trey Benson, who was very banged up. He was he was questionable for the Louisville game. That wasn't widely reported. We were being told it. It's why he didn't play a ton. It's why Toa Philly did run in the Wildcat a lot more. Trey Benson was hurt. A guy who opted into another season, didn't play the bowl game due to injury, and preparing for the NFL, and somehow he's a bad guy for that. Lawrence Toa Philly coming back next year. He had surgery. He's a bad guy for that. Keon Coleman played the last half of the season, very banged up, missed a game, missed other time, likely going in the first or second round. He's a bad guy for opting out and protecting his future. Johnny Wilson had 2 concussions, I'm told, this year. Was very banged up down the stretch. He's a bad guy for opting out. Jaheim Bell was banged up down the stretch. Maybe could have played. I don't know. He's a bad guy for opting out. Jared Verse, top 15 pick, just like Brock Bowers, one of the best players at his position. Somehow Jared Verse is a bad guy for opting out. Fabian Lovett, Tatum Bethune, Braden Fisk, all very hurt this year and banged up. Bethune missed time. Fisk was in a boot for most of the season. Fabian Lovett wasn't even able to practice and be full go at times due to being hurt all year. I'm told that Tatum and Braden tried to make it go. Norvell mentioned in his press conference a couple of guys that he thought could have gone and just weren't able to make it go. Renardo Green, Jarian Jones opted out. Renardo was definitely banged up down the stretch. Akeem Dent was banged up, missed a game and some extra time, missed a couple of games. It's when Kevin Knowles had to play. You guys all had thoughts on that. So all of these guys that opt out, and then obviously Jordan opting out because he had a broken leg, a leg that was snapped in half. So all these guys are bad guys because they opted out of the game? No, all these guys were hurt and banged up and gave every single thing that they had to win 13 games. I saw Sonone tweet this. They watched their friends and their teammates' leg snap in half, and then they went out hurt and laid it all on the line to basically be told that their efforts just weren't good enough. And so what do? They went ahead and got treatment. They went ahead and opted for surgery, several of them. They went ahead and opted for protecting millions of dollars of investment in the NFL. You saw different guys get hurt in bowl games this offseason, and no one likes that. And so I'm glad that our guys who have a chance at the NFL, have been banged up, have been playing at less than 100%, didn't take risks and didn't take chances with their careers. All right, I want to show you this Kirby Smart video, but first, I do want to tell you about our friends over at Rapid SEO Host. Now, they specialize in high-speed, SEO-focused WordPress hosting. If you have a website or if your business needs a website, reach out to them and let them know that TJ sent you. There's no consultation free. It's on the house. They will chat with you about what they can do for your business. The short of the long is they're able to take your website and make it blazing fast. They can optimize your WordPress website so that in search results, it comes up faster than anyone else's. And that means every time somebody searches your type of business, your website is likely to show up ahead of your competition. It's a competitive world out there. They are noles just like you are and just like I am. Make sure that you're trusting your business and your website's needs to Rapid SEO Host. They're really efficient. They offer a very hands-off approach. Make sure that you reach out. I'll put all of their info down there in the description. You can reach out to my guy, Jay. I'll put his email there as well. If you have any questions, let them be the ones to take care of your website and business needs. Okay, let's show you this Kirby Smart video. In his press conference, he surprised me just a little bit by calling out some of the BS. A lot of people want to blame Florida State. They want to blame the players. They want to blame Mike Norvell. They want to blame the culture. Kirby has never been one to not take shots. I've seen him take shots multiple times in press conferences, but he didn't take a shot anywhere near Tallahassee when he went in his press conference last night. Who did he call out? Take a listen.
All right, everybody can say that we had our guys and they didn't have their guys. I can listen to all that. But college football has got to decide what they want. And I know things are changing. And I think things are going to change next year. And you know what? There's going to still be bowl games outside of those. People got to decide what they want and what they really want to get out of it. Because it's really unfortunate for those kids on that sideline that had to play in that game that didn't have their full arsenal. And it affected the game 100%.
A lot of people wanted to make comparisons about, oh, well, this is why Florida State shouldn't have been in the game. Kirby knew what was up. Kirby knew that the opt-outs were a large part of what happened in this game. Now, if Florida State has no opt-outs and nobody hit the portal and has their full roster minus just Jordan Travis, everyone hurt, still guts it up and plays, every first-round pick goes in there and plays, maybe Georgia still wins anyway. In fact, they probably do. If there's anything that was proven, it's that Georgia is definitely one of the best 4 teams in the country. And if the committee just used their own logic, Georgia would have been in. But the committee never uses logic. They didn't use logic to keep Florida State out. They just wanted Alabama and Texas in. And Florida State ultimately was the one that failed because of that. But Kirby knew what was up. He knows this state of college football is broken. When you can get to a point where you tell 13 wins, that's not good enough. Where you can tell 85 kids, hey, because one of you got hurt, you're not allowed in. That is bad for college football. There are 13 dorks who sit in a room and get to decide the fate of the players who decide games on the field. And Kirby knows that that's wrong. Maybe it's the fact that he was a GA here. Maybe he's got a little bit of a soft spot for the Noles in his heart. He didn't show it on the field Saturday. But Kirby knows that that's wrong. Kirby knows why those kids opted out. Kirby knows that they had given everything they possibly could have. And when they were told it's not good enough, why would they go out and play? Why would they go out and risk their NFL futures, their NFL careers? Oh man, that guy's just going to be a 5th round pick. Guess what? 5th round NFL money is still better than a lot of us watching this video are making. Better than I'm making. YouTube needs to start paying a little bit better. Oh man, he's just a day 6 draft pick. Why didn't he just go out there and play? A round 6 draft pick. Why didn't he just go out? Man, he just might be an undrafted free agent. Yeah, well, he's an undrafted free agent. If he gets hurt in this game, he'll never play a down in the NFL. Yeah, he's a 5th round draft pick, but if he gets hurt in this game, he goes down to an undrafted free agent. No guaranteed money. Oh man, he's not a day 1 guy. Why don't he just go out and play? I wouldn't play. Not a chance. Not after I got screwed by a system. There'd be no way. If I had hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars on the line, it ain't worth it. It is not worth it. And Kirby knows that. And Kirby understands that. And that was Kirby's message last night. What the culture discussion discounts is the guys who opted in to a full extra year of playing. These guys didn't play in the bowl game, but they opted into continuing to climb, to continuing to fight for it all through the battle's end and through Florida State. Johnny Wilson didn't play, but he opted into an entire extra season. Trey Benson didn't play, but he opted into an entire extra season. Jared Verse didn't play, but he was getting 1st-round grades last year, and he opted into an entire extra season. Tatum Bethune didn't play. Kalen DeLoach didn't play, but they opted into entire extra seasons. Akeem Dent could have left last year, and where would we be without him? We saw what it was like when he wasn't on the field. Guys that had opted into entire extra seasons were somehow called out for not playing in one exhibition scrimmage game. Jordan Travis coaching up Brock Glenn on the sideline is something else that's discounted when you bring up this culture debate and discussion. Jordan Travis saw his leg get snapped in half. He saw his team get left out of the playoff and their dreams get snapped in half. He tweeted, "I wish I would have broken my leg earlier so that the committee could have seen how good this team is without me." And he was still on the sideline coaching up Brock Glenn in a game. Listen, Jordan's not dumb. Jordan knew we were going to lose that game going into it. I don't think Jordan was in there like, oh, man, we got to show. We're about to beat them. No, everybody knew what was coming. And he was still on the sideline coaching Brock up. A kid who has given everything to Florida State. A kid who has paid his dues, right? There are kids who you could say, man, you've done enough. Kalen DeLoach, you've done enough, man. You did not have to play last night. But he did. Jordan Travis, you've done enough. You did not have to coach up Brock Glenn on the sideline last night. But he did. The culture discussion discounts guys playing in last year's bowl game. Listen, they all opted into the bowl game last year. They had something to fight. They had something to prove. They had something to play for. Hey, just like Georgia did last night. Georgia had something to prove last night. Florida State didn't. Florida State had nothing to prove. Florida State had gone out and proved absolutely everything 13 times. A couple of times with a backup, a couple of times with a third-string quarterback, or once with a third-string quarterback. But Georgia had something to prove. Georgia lost in their 13 games. Georgia lost to Alabama. And so they felt they had something to prove, and they did. They went out and proved it and left no doubt. But Florida State had nothing to prove. The culture discussion, it discounts the fact that Florida State won 19 games in a row and went 28-6 over their last 34 games. You don't win with that kind of efficiency, and you don't run off that many wins in a row without having a good culture. It is impossible. You don't fight back from trailing. You don't fight back without your leader. You don't fight back without your quarterback. You just don't. And for people to say that the entire culture is now in question or undone or we're unsure about it because of one game, because of a few opt-outs, I went down the list, guys. Go back down through the list of the guys who were out. They were all banged up this year. They were all fighting through stuff. There were maybe 2 guys who opted out that weren't struggling with something. It's intellectually dishonest. I don't even think people are dumb. I think people like Mike Farrell and Mike Griffith and others, they're just intellectually dishonest. They know that what they're saying is not accurate, but they want to say it anyway. It is a cheap shot. It is an easy cheap shot. Oh, man, look at Kirby and Nick's culture. Look at what they've done. How many games did those 2 teams that people like to point to lose between last year and this year? Well, 3. How many games did the Noles lose this year before they were told it wasn't good enough? None. The comparisons are not even close to the same. Now, there is a culture issue, and Kirby Smart alluded to it, and it was tweeted out last night, and we'll look at that for a moment. Max Toscano said the culture problem is not Florida State's. The culture problem lies with the committee that told them that their 13 games meant nothing. So why would you risk millions playing in one more? And he's absolutely right. The culture problem is the committees. It's the NCAAs. It's the idea that these kids are playing in a meaningless exhibition when they've been told that they're not good enough. And that's where the issue lies. Not with Florida State, not with Mike Norvell, not with any of the players who literally threw the NFL away for a year to come back and climb, and they decided not to play in a bowl game. In a bowl game that meant nothing, in a bowl game that was a sorry consolation prize for everything they'd earned. I don't blame any of them at all. Most of them banged up, most of them putting millions of dollars, risking their futures and careers in a game that means nothing. It just wasn't worth it. I don't blame any of the kids for opting out. Would have loved to seen more Kalen DeLoaches out there. Would have loved to seen more kids play. Absolutely. I think I talked about this a lot in the live. I think our depth was a major problem, and I would have loved to seen more kids out there going. But that's not the way it went down, and I don't blame one of them for not being out there. The idea of a culture problem is hilarious, but it is certainly something that Mike Norvell now needs to combat. He needs to prove and show it isn't an issue. And how's he do that? Well, he needs to have some hits in the portal soon. He needs to have a very focused spring. He needs to go out and have an excellent offseason. And then when August rolls around, and we're all in Ireland drinking Guinness and throwing back Jameson, he needs to go out and destroy Georgia Tech and put to rest the narrative that there's some kind of a culture problem. And then the next week, against whatever ACC opponent they'll give us, probably Clemson on a short week of travel from overseas, because that's what the ACC will do to us this year. Just wait. He needs to come out and win again. And then when they play Memphis the next week, he needs to come out and win again. They won 19 games in a row. It'd be real nice to do another streak like that. Not saying that happens, not saying it doesn't. But Mike Norvell just needs to stay consistent with what he's done for the last 3.5 years here. Just keep preaching the same thing you've been preaching. There will be doubters, and there will be haters, and there will be SEC mouth breathers who continue to speak life into a fake narrative. Kirby Smart knows. I saw Lane Kiffin quote tweet that and say facts. I saw people like RG3 and Booger McFarland and others who continue to say that it was BS what happened to Florida State, and the culture thing is completely inaccurate and made up. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for letting me rant about this a little bit. Hadn't been a couple of weeks since we got to rant because the playoff thing hasn't been going on at all. We got a lot of stuff planned for this week and this year. Happy New Year to you if you're watching. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.